Barnabas is not even his real name. In fact, it was a nickname given to him by the people in the early church. His real name is Joseph. That's what his parents named him. Then this guy in Acts chapter 4 named Joseph was just so positive in his conversations that people started nicknaming him Barnabas because everything he said made you feel great. His journey started in Acts 4, and the last verse we get about him is in Galatians 2, our chapter in the 260 journey. And this is Barnabas's journey on how a really, really good man ended up pretty bad. Strap in for an eye-opening journey. I remember reading something interesting about the first Olympics in Greece. The ancient Greece, the originator of the Olympic Games, had a twist to some of their running events. It was said that the runner who won the race was not the man who crossed the line in the shortest amount of time, but it was the man who crossed it in the least time with his torch still burning. See, they were all given a torch before they ran, and thus the Olympic torch that is carried from country to country today is where it got its start from. In order to get the medal, you needed not only to be fast, but you also needed to have your torch continually burning. That sounds about right for every Christian. We want to make sure we're not just doing stuff, but doing things with a heart on fire for God. I want to end my life with a burning heart for God. Let's check out Barnabas's torch. His journey is all through Acts. He is the encourager in Acts chapter 4. His journey then brings us to Acts chapter 9, which is pivotal. You could see why he is called the encourager, because his gift is exactly what the apostle Paul needed at his conversion in Acts 9. See, Paul, who has been single-handedly bringing havoc on the early Christians through imprisonment and death, has a vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus and is now a Christian. There is a big problem, though. No one trusts him. They think it's a ploy to kill more Christians. Enter stage left, Barnabas. Listen to these verses in Acts 9. Upon arrival in Jerusalem, he tried to meet, that's Paul, with the believers, but they were all afraid of him. They thought he was faking. Then Barnabas brought him to the apostles and told them how Paul had seen the Lord on the way to Damascus, what the Lord had said to him, and all about his powerful preaching in the name of Jesus. Then they accepted him. Think about this. If it wasn't for Barnabas, Paul could have chucked it all and said, forget this Christian thing, if this is the way his people act. Truth be told, if there were no Barnabas, there may not have been an Apostle Paul. Barnabas plays a key role in the church and in Paul's growth and ministry. Barnabas and Paul go on the very first missionary journey together to share the gospel. Then in Acts 15, the torch seemed to get a big gust of wind come against it. A very big disagreement happened between the disciple and the discipler, Paul and Barnabas, right before the second missionary journey. It was over whether they should take a young man named John Mark with them. These words are important in Acts 15 before we head to Galatians 2. Here's what it says in verse 39. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left. Then that's it. No more mention of Barnabas until our reading today in Galatians 2. It's 6 years later, and after this disagreement, and we read the last verse in the Bible about this person, Barnabas, and we will find out whether the torch is still lit. This is verse 11 of chapter 2. When Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him, Paul says, to his face, for he did something very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterward, when some of his friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. Barnabas the encourager, Barnabas the visionary, is now Barnabas the hypocrite. Paul's ministry partner, Paul's first mentor, Paul's co-pastor and missionary has now gone hypocrite. Boy, that word hypocrite is such an ugly word. It's a Greek word which means actor on a stage. You start acting instead of being who you really are. How does that happen? And for Barnabas, how did it happen? The first verse about Barnabas the encourager in Acts 4 is around AD 30. The last verse about Barnabas the hypocrite in Galatians 2 is about AD 54. That's 24 years apart. Barnabas is finishing his race, not as an encourager, but a hypocrite with the torch going out. Barnabas ends up in Galatia, and the context of this hypocrisy verse is really important. See, the church in Galatia is having problems. They don't want certain people part of their church, meaning Gentiles. Paul finds out and is about to rebuke them, and then finds out his mentor is there right in the midst of this, Barnabas. See, Barnabas no longer is on the mission field, but is back in Jerusalem and found a group of people bitter just like him. He is with people who fuel his fleshly flame and not his spiritual flame. If you are with people who let you talk about your offense that you have with others and they don't challenge you to fix it, then you're with the wrong group of people. Instead of Barnabas making it right with Paul, Barnabas went to be with a group of people just as dysfunctional as he was. So here's the question. How does a really, really good man end up really, really bad? And can this happen to me? I don't think I'm out of bounds to think it's from the disagreement with Paul in Acts 15. Something got in Barnabas' heart when it happened, and he didn't fix it by resolving it. What's dangerous about these kinds of things is when it doesn't seem to be a problem at first, but over time, it can become toxic, which tells me something really important. Time doesn't fix all wounds. A wound unfixed over time corrodes the heart. Time is an awful doctor. It mistreats and deceives its patients. It's not time, but forgiveness that heals all wounds. I heard one person say, I can forgive, but I cannot forget, is just another way of saying I can't forgive. I think God may be showing us not to take disagreements lightly. Unresolved conflict has a way of blowing out our fire in our torch. Rick Warren said it's always more rewarding to resolve a conflict than to dissolve a relationship. We cannot finish well with unforgiveness in our heart. Barnabas' journey should have ended in Acts on 3 missionary journeys with Paul and spreading the gospel. Instead, a good man ends his journey in Galatia, telling his people his side of the disagreement. Barnabas was supposed to finish with the torch burning, declaring the good news, but instead he's telling the bad news of a conflict. One of my mentors and friends, Winky Pratney, was so insightful when he said these words. There are a lot of happy young sinners, but you don't see happy old sinners because sin doesn't age well. Boy, that's the truth. Sin doesn't age well. Acts 15 and Galatians 2 is 6 years. This disagreement sat in Barnabas' heart for 6 years. The sin didn't age well. Thanks for joining the 260 Journey.